Peace and blessings, friends. Welcome back to our weekly Bhagavad Gita study and yoga philosophy discussion. We are here again today. We'll be diving into chapter 3 where we left off in a really, I think, informative verse. So before we get into that, let's open with our invocations. Jagai, you're ready to go?
Om Agyana Tamarandasya Gyanan Jana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. And that means I was blinded by ignorance. Om Agyana Tamarandasya, ignorance, Gyananjana Shalakaya, and knowledge was placed on my eyes. And because of it, Chakshur Unmilitam Yena, they opened. Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. I offer my respects to the Guru who has opened my eyes with knowledge.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Whether you are here live, I want to shout out to our live Zoomers, Riley and Asriel and Ed Prabhu over there. Thank you so much for being here. Jagai, I appreciate your presence and your wisdom and helping me hold this class down regularly. And we are starting off chapter 3, verse 35. We ended here last week, and we're going to pick up here. And I think before we dive in, just for some context, I like context. I think it's helpful. Arjuna is on a battlefield, about to begin this battle between some extended family and royal dynasties. And it's not a battle he wants to fight, and he's trying to finagle his way out of it logically, mentally, rationally, spiritually, all of the angles. And Krishna is trying to, here at this moment, let him know, like, you just gotta do, like, show up and do your duty. Don't be attached to the results. Like, this is karma yoga. Like, just go in and don't worry about what happens. This is just where you are. This is what you need to be doing. This is what's in front of you. You're a warrior. You were made for this. Get out there and fight. Stop being so lethargic and go. And Arjuna is still kind of resisting and getting this kind of advice and insight from Krishna. And so we landed here at text 35. So shall we just dive in? All right. It is far better to discharge one's prescribed duties, even though faultily, right? So even though you may not be great at it, right? Than do another's duties perfectly. Destruction in the course of performing one's own duty is better than engaging in another's duties. For to follow another's path is dangerous. You might as well just be the beautiful mess that you are and just be you. There's much more entanglement and entrapment that comes from the material world when you try to be somebody else.
So Dharma, this kind of ends this little chunk that Krishna's talking about Dharma and other things, and then Arjuna asks about lust. And this word duties, in the Sanskrit, it says svadharma, means your dharma, but Prabhupada here writes duties. Maybe you should say something about that, because I know myself, I've read this verse 1,000 times in my life, and I go, my duties, like my to-do list.
Yeah. So your svadharma, that's a term that is used to signify. Sva means like to be established in. Sva. Right? So svasta means to be established in the self. Svasta, right? You're established in self. Svadharma means you are established, you're rooted, you're situated in your purpose, like what you came here to do. Your svadharma is like your personal unique path. We could call it your personal gift and uniqueness that you bring to this world in a way to leave your imprint and leave your mark and to have the experiences that you need to have the mark on you, right? The mark of experience and time. So this is I think Swadharma is the one that a lot of yoga students ask me about. Like, what is my Dharma? How do I know what my Dharma is? What we translate that as, what is my purpose? My personal, unique purpose in this world. What is it? And so I think that this is what this verse really means is you're better off just being you, the hot mess that you think you are, the faulty person that you think you are with all of your shortcomings that you think you have, then to try to be somebody else. Like, that is just such a torturous and tormentuous life. It creates so much suffering, so much attachment, so much of the envy, the lust, the anger, the greed. I think it just kind of gets cultivated in that space when you are trying to be somebody else. It's one thing to be inspired by somebody and to like kind of emulate what they're doing, but to mimic or try to be somebody else is a totally different thing. And it really comes from ego. So that's how I perceive this verse. And authenticity is a value that I hold very high. And so I really love this verse because I think that Krishna really is speaking to the importance of just being authentically you. To not go against your nature. You know, we had that discussion about what is your nature, and Jagai always gives this analogy of like, he can never be a ballerina. And I was thinking about it, you know, like, and then I did the Ayurvedic talk in teacher training, and we talk about Prakriti, about nature. And so it's like this, like the nature of water is that it's wet. Like, you know that there is water because there is wetness. Like, you cannot separate. Like, that's it. That is what makes water water, is that it's wet. And so when we speak of Dharma, our nature, we have some element about us that is part of like what we're here to contribute. As much as we're here to learn and grow, I do really believe that we are here to contribute. That's why we have things like karma yoga and being of service and uplifting others. So here he's saying, like, don't go against your nature. Don't try to be somebody that you're not. It doesn't mean that you, like, Jagai could take lessons and do ballerina dancing and do, you know, he could get a coach and he could try and he could have a journey doing it and he could learn some things and he could do a performance and we'd all cheer him on and be like, we're so proud of you for stepping out of your comfort zone and doing something that's not in your nature. I think there's a good benefit in that sometimes, but there is an element of which sometimes we just fight who we are because we think we need to be something else. And that fight is a losing battle. So I have some verses referenced next to this one, chapter 18, verse 41. Can we jump ahead there? I haven't reread it or pre-read it, but okay, so it does talk about the nature of the person. So in text 41, chapter 18, Brahmanas, which are like the priests, right? The high up spiritual sages and rishis and priests. The Kshatriyas, the warriors. The Vaishyas, which are like the business people. And the Shudras, which I believe are the laborers, you know, like the workers. Are distinguished by the qualities born of their own natures in accordance with the material modes, so in accordance with the gunas, right? Goodness, passion, and ignorance. So here, and actually we asked, I think Riley, you asked about the caste system in teacher training. And I was talking about this like original idea of the caste system, and how really it has become a class system. And in what we see modern day caste system in India is still a class system. We have a class system. A caste system just creates a hierarchy. I think the origin of what we call the caste system is this concept that like, you can just tell some people are just born to like be something. It's like, it's just ingrained in them. Like they can't, no matter where they turn, it's just constantly coming at them to be this thing, right? Some people are, and it's not that you can't be anything else. You can definitely explore and expand yourself, but there is a nature within you of which if you can like feed that part of you, honor that part of you, nurture that part of you, there's a lot less suffering in your life because of it. And you're just surrendered to who you are. Doesn't mean that you can't cultivate other things that aren't in your nature. It just will be harder. It'll be more difficult. You'll have more resistance. So finding the things that are your nature that line up with it is the path of least resistance, you know. Questions, comments so far? Let's see, I have one more verse here, 47. Oh yeah, let's go to 47 real quick. 1847. It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful actions. So also, as we're like, even as we're messing up, because it's part of our dharma, we're not going to incur the same kind of karma that we would incur by just trying to do someone else's thing that they're designed to do, they're wired, so to speak, to do. I just think too, like there's another element that seems like common sense, which is, I know I've coached a lot of people who are like math teachers, accountants, whatever it is, and they're good at it, but it's not their passion. And they're so dissatisfied with life. They don't have the enthusiasm. They don't have the sense of meaning. It feels empty. And I think that they're like, even though it may be difficult because we are faulty, because we're growing and enhancing our skills as we go, it can be harder to do what's in our nature because we got to work at it to refine those skills. And I've seen this with a lot of people, you know, they have a good job, it pays the bills, but it's really not their dharma. And there is a sense of like lifelessness about that. Thoughts, questions, comments?
Thank you. I appreciated that you brought up these two verses because they're very matchy. There's not a lot of matchy verses, but these ones are matchy. In the bottom of 335 in the purport, Prabhupada says, for example, a Brahmana who's in the mode of goodness is nonviolent. For a Kshatriya who is in the mode of passion is allowed to be violent. As such, for a Kshatriya, it is better to be vanquished following the rules of violence than to imitate a Brahmana who follows the principles of nonviolence. Well, that's a bold statement. So I've thought about this, and let's do a little example. Let's say some guys have robbed a bank and they've got a bunch of people hostage, and it's a very terrible situation. And at that circumstance, we hope that there's somebody who will help. So we call the SWAT team, because the SWAT team is trained to go in there and get the hostages. We're happy that they're going to do this, right? And so if you call them and you say, we got hostages, shit, get in there, like help. And they say, we've all taken the path of meditation. And now they killed everybody in the bank and they run out. The SWAT team actually like incurs karma because it was their duty to go in there and save them, even if it meant they were to get killed. And that's a position, a dharma in our society that we could recognize, the necessity of that. Where you think, well, Brahmanas are meditating, the priests, why can't they go do it? Because they have a nature and a dharma, and they have to fulfill their dharma for themselves, for their benefit, and for the benefit of everybody else. And so like Dharma was saying, and I do joke that I say, like if I decided I wanted to give up everything I'm doing and become a ballet dancer, I don't have the nature at all. And so everybody smiles. I think it's funny. And even if I put on the clothes and I dance, everybody go, oh yeah, Jaga, you did a great job. Good try. But you didn't think my ballet was good. You just thought I had a good try and you wanted me to like feel good. You thought my ballet sucked. So
you have to see it to believe it and give you our honest feedback.
So the point here is, as you're saying, Dharma, is that not only do we have our own desires but we have an actual physical nature. We've been thrown into a world, and we have to do it whether we want to or not. It's part of who we are. Like my two boys here, they dropped out of high school, and now they want me to teach them. So now it's my responsibility to stop everything I'm doing and do homeschooling for my teenage boys.
And it's in your nature to want to teach these things, part of your dharma. And
Yeah.
so what if you were just like, nope, go to school, nope, I'm not giving it to, like, there's a reason why they were born to a parent like you that can hold this space for them.
Sure.
And a good way to kind of, if you're trying to figure out what your dharma is paying attention to your natural heart inclinations and propensities, like really what your heart feels called to do. Is a good way to start kind of being on that journey of, I'm trying to kind of connect with what my Swadharma is. It's ingrained in you. You don't need to go find it somewhere. It's just about refining yourself in a way where it just starts to come through more and more. And then where you are inclined, if you follow that, you will end up there, and it'll be like second nature. We say it's like second nature to do this for me. That's a good phrase that we use. It's indicative of you're getting close, or you're in your Swadharma. So good, you put a nice answer there. So Ed is asking, nature of water is wet, and the nature of human is. And Jagai put, the nature of human is to seek divinity. And I wanted to add or say to that is, the nature of water is wet. It's an element, right? So we can get really at the core of this sort of understanding when we get down to the basics, right? The nature of fire is that it's hot, right? Luminous. The nature of air is that it's dry and mobile. It's always moving, subtle. And so we are our Prakriti. So nature is Prakriti. We as individual humans have our own personal Prakriti that's made up of all those elements. So our nature is many layered, depending on the amount of elements that we have, right? The quantity of elements that our unique constitution is carrying. But Ayurveda will tell you, the Vedas will tell you, the nature of human is to seek divinity, is to know who we are. The nature of the human is to this long, old question of, who am I? It's the nature of the human. That's what I've heard in Ayurvedic lectures often as well. That's why in Ayurveda, they believe that the first cause of disease is forgetting our true nature. And so part of our human drive and our human nature, our human inclination, is to really know and understand ourselves. But it's a good question. Anyone else got any ideas? The nature of human is? Because you got the ego is part of the human. What's the nature of the ego? Right? There's many layers to the human. It's a whole package of all these different ingredients that all come from the original Prakriti, Purusha and Prakriti, right? Spirit and matter. And that matter breaks down into all these things that ends up being all the elements that make up our human makeup, basically. The body, the senses that take information in, and the senses that allow us to, they're called the organs of action, that allows us to do things, the hands, the feet, things like this. The ego and the different departments of the mind. So the human is made up of all of those things, and each of them have their own nature. So we're sort of like these complicated computer machines in a holographic matrix. And we got to figure out what player we are in the game. Like, what's my role in this game? Right? Am I the one going out to check out the spot? Am I the one hanging back, watching the whatever I'm protecting in whatever silly video game kids play now, where they're using weapons and all kinds of weird stuff and scoping out situations? Like, what player are you? What are you here to do? We all have a role. So I appreciate the question. And I like Jagai's answer. But anyone else? Azrael, how you doing over there? Just listening today? Okay. Awesome. All right, comments, questions? How do we feel about this when we hear it?
I really liked the purport, it's called. when they're explaining how perhaps, I think they say like the brahmanas maybe will like, oh, over here, that the brahmanas later on maybe act as the kshatriya, and that like that could be like a fluid thing when you take on those different qualities. It was kind of grounding to think about that. Maybe different parts of your life you have to embody different qualities.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fluid. We are, as Ed is asking, what is the nature of humans? Actually, let's look at chapter 18, text 54. Chapter 18, text 54. This is kind of like the pinnacle of human success. And that is Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma na Sochati na Kanchati Samasarveshu Bhuteshu Mad Bhaktim Labate Param. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma means that one is situated completely in their spirituality in total, and in that space, their heart, their Krishna consciousness, their soul is fully open, and they're totally peaceful, they're sama situated, and they are like awakened. And that is the goal, or the nature of the human, is to go from this place of being ignorant, covered, miserable, confused, to that place of situation. And there's a path that as we go towards divinity, divinity pulls us closer. And as we're being pulled closer, all the things that we go through, all the layers are set up for us to get closer. Like if I have 8 cents in my hand and Dharma's got $1,000, she wants to give it to me, I have to let go of the 8 cents to grab the $1,000. And so maybe you think you're a Brahmana, but divinity asks you to act like a Kshatriya. Or maybe you think you're a Kshatriya, but divinity asks you to be a Brahmana or a Sudra or whatever. And all these things are to help bring us to this point of being awakened. What do you think?
I like the verse. I'm just going to read these parts, right? One who is thus transcendentally situated, as Jagai said, at once realizes Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. That's a symptom, right? Fully joyful. He or she never laments or desires to have anything. He or she is equally disposed towards every living entity. In that state, he or she attains pure devotional service unto me. I just think of people that I know that are really living in their Dharma, and regardless of what's going on, they're genuinely joyful, content, happy. Even as they're going through challenges, they may have feels about it, but overall, they're joyful. Like they don't have that life, that lackluster to life, because they're climbing up a hill that wasn't meant for them to climb. And so it's just not, it's not your path for you to be on. You got more exciting things to do somewhere else. Ed also added here, one perspective of nature of human is to evolve or unfold. And then he says, nice, Jagai, I think it's not the job that's our nature, but the nature of human is to be. Sometimes we do sort of, we see other people who like their Dharma is really tied up with their work, like their actual work that they do. And so we think that our Dharma is about our work and our career. But it isn't always that way. You can have a career and have a job, but also be endeavoring in your Dharma elsewhere. Like Jagai does coding. He's a coder. I never, like when I found that out, I'm like, I never would have guessed that. It doesn't seem like it's in his nature when you look at him. But to some degree it is, he's able to do it. Like that's definitely not in my nature. But he has some capacity for it, right? But he's not looking to fulfill his joy cup with his work. He's doing other things that are part of his Dharma that fill that joy cup for him. So it isn't always that our dharma and our job or our career match up, but sometimes it does.
Mhm.
Yes, Azrael.
I also am like kind of thinking about it in terms of like, as you go through life, your dharma evolves too. Like it's not static to the point where it's like just only one thing. Because you may have many seasons in your life where that starts to either get more clear or you have more than one thing. Like I imagine a lot of parents are probably like, oh my gosh, this is like the most amazing thing ever. And feel like that's part of their dharma, but that doesn't have to be the only aspect of their purpose or role or role here. Like it can also be that, you know, they are an amazing artist or something and bring art and beauty into the world, or I feel like it's like multi-leveled. And as we go on, that is kind of like the evolution that Ed, you were mentioning about, as well as you get to be and do and all of these different things. And that all of that becomes your dharma, which is part of who you are as a person, especially when you begin to follow that.
Yeah, I think it's a great contribution to the conversation. There are many layers. It's like refining and refining and refining. And so it's the dharma of who we are is always going to be coming through at deeper levels, deeper layers, and it can manifest in different ways. You know, there's like with our work and what we do, but just the nature of who we are. Like some people like Marlene, a lot of you all know Marlene. You could say that there's a dharma to her that like compassion. Like she's such a sweet, compassionate, loving person. She's a person. She's got her other sides, but you could just tell like there's this something that's in her nature to be super compassionate, and so she will have a tendency to lean towards teachings that have a heavier emphasis in that. So she loves to study Buddhism and is really about compassion and non-suffering and non-harming and from a Buddhist perspective. And she loves Kuan Yin, and you know, those are her inclinations that are deep at her core. And so that can come through in her work. It can come through in the way that she mothers. It can come through in the way that she shows up with her friends, the way she teaches. And so your dharma is like this, you know, like those crystal balls that are clear and when the sun hits them, the prism balls, they like shine the rainbows everywhere. So like you are at your core, and then that light hits it when you're in alignment with divinity, and it can come out in so many different ways. And we get to experience all those different ways that we can express our dharma creatively. And as we like peel away the layers in our life and we get closer to more of like the truth of who we are, we discover a more depth of our dharma. So I agree with you 100% that it's just a thing that's ever evolving and ever growing, and something that is continuous until we complete the cycle of samsara and we out of here. But beautiful. Thank you, Azrael. Shall we read some more verses? Okay, let's see, text 36. Arjuna says, this is a great question. Now Arjuna is asking Krishna, "O descendant of Vrishni, by what is one impelled to sinful acts, even unwillingly, as if engaged by force?" He's like, just sometimes, man, I feel like I can't help myself. Like as if something else is making me, I know I shouldn't, but there I go. And then Krishna replied, oh, go ahead, Jagai.
I was going to ask you, because we get this a lot through the Gita, and that is, what does it mean by sin? Because the Gita and the Vedic teachings do not have a list of things which are like taboo. So what does that mean? We don't have like the 10 Commandments or something. So what does it mean by sin?
Go ahead, Azrael.
Would that be like part of The yamas, and then like going against your nature.
Anything that's going to create, anything that you do for the fruit of the activity is a sinful, is what we call sinful, but anything that is going to beget more karma for you.
Mm.
That's how I've understood it. What's your thoughts, Jagai?
Yeah, what you're saying is true. It's any activity that's going to bring binding results to this material world. For example, going out and I'm always making an extreme analogy because it's more clear. If I go out and buy a new Lamborghini, is that sinful?
Well, you're creating more attachment to like, I am going to get so much attention because I got this cool car. And now my identity is wrapped up in the fact that I have this car and it equates to my value.
Yeah. And now some lower person is like driving too slow in front of me and their cheap Honda Accord. Who the hell are they? I'm going to blaze around them and rev my engine. Have I created what the Vedic teachings called anarta, or an unwanted quality? Yeah. So that's a sin. Yes.
Well, so I gotta ask, does that mean that everybody who purchases a Lamborghini is acting in sin, or is that just pertaining to you, Jagai?
Not me.
No, like if you personally go out and get a Lamborghini, you know, because I feel like that's where my mind starts to.
Well, that's a perfect question. And that is exactly why I asked this, that there is not a hard list of things to do and don't do, which now obviously there's some, you grab a baby and you kill it. Okay, that's not a good thing to do. Or you cut your guru's head off. I'd say that's probably a sin. But it's not that you have this hard list of things. Like, is killing bad? Yes. Is it a sin? But it just depends.
It depends. Like, what if you kill somebody because you're defending your family?
Yeah. Or you're defending some children or whatever, or, it just depends.
It depends on your intention and why you're doing it. And so that's why the definition here is like a little broad. And of course, we want to, Jagai is giving extreme examples because it gets the point across, but we have to start with simple things with ourselves and not go to quickly like, oh, well, here's another spiritual tradition that says that we can't be rich and have nice things. And that's not what it's saying. It's your mode when you get those things, as Ed is putting here in the chat. He says, unless he purchased the Lambo to serve Krishna. What if the Lambo was purchased to serve? Like, now you have to genuinely come up with a reason to connect that. And I think that you could. We live in such an expansive universe. You could find a way to do that. Or you can bypass and say you're doing it and have the Lambo and still dupe yourself into more bondage. It's really doing the things that cultivate more of your material nature, whatever it is. So if you can have a Lambo and somebody sideswipes it and you're like, it's cool, whatever. I'm not disturbed, it's just metal. Then that's different than this guy that Jagai was talking about, like zooming around everybody, somebody scratch it up, he'd be livid. You're creating attachment, and those attachments give rise to the anartas, which are like very much often likened to the 7 deadly sins, right? Lust, anger, greed, hatred, envy, jealousy. And one more, I forget what it is, but so when we have those anartas, the attachments is what gives rise, our human clinging material nature that wants to like just have it. When we create that attachment materially and we don't get that attachment fed, those anartas grow in us.
There's There was a story, there was a magazine, they brought Prabhupada, a magazine of like a Himalayan yogi who was in a magazine, and they had like a pile of money and he was going like this to it. And they showed Prabhupada, and Prabhupada said, you should take a picture of me with a pile of money going like this.
Look, my
Why?
mentor says you have to have money to sustain your message.
Yeah.
We live in a world where that's just the nature of this world, that we exchange through paper money. And if you have a message or you have a mission or you have a service that you want to give to the world, it takes money to sustain that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so there's an element of which it's like, yes, bring the money in, because we can grow what we're doing. We can expand. We can help people more. We can serve people with that money more. And so there's the idea is to spiritualize all the material things that we do, but genuinely from the heart, from devotion.
Yeah. So the question is there, what does it mean by sin? Because this says papa, which means sin. How does one stop sinning even though impulsively? What does sin mean? Because it's not the kind of sin that we think, which is coming from more of a Judeo-Christian like list of bad things to do. It's not like that.
So you guys are sharing that sin in this context, or I guess in the context of this philosophy, is more so doing something just for fruitive results only, rather than the opposite would be doing it in service to Krishna or whatever God you believe in.
Or guru, divinity.
Okay.
Or even if they're atheist and they're just doing it in good intention to help others, and they're not doing it from a place of ego. This is just a great simplification.
Mm.
We do it from ego, it binds us. We get all entangled. We all know that, right? And sometimes we don't realize we're doing something from ego until we're all entangled. And we're like, oh, I really thought I was coming from a good place, but I'm all up in this thing, upset about whatever the results gave me or didn't give me. That's the sin, right? And it's interesting, I think in the old biblical culture, to sin was when you strayed off the path, basically. You weren't on the path, which that's a whole other talk we could have some other time. I think everything is the path. It's just, are we like growing on the path and going with the flow, or are we resisting the path? And when we are in resistance, then we are out of alignment, right? And so to repent, when you sin, you have to repent, right? Repentance meant to turn back. Repentance didn't mean you got on your knees, you said, I'm sorry, God, please forgive me of my sins. I'm such a bad person, and like, take it away from me, right? Which is so weird now that I think about it. Like, why do Christians pray for their sins to be taken away if they don't really believe in karma? Or, I mean, I know they want to get into heaven and they can't have any sins, but repentance really meant to turn back, like the etymology of the original word repentance meant to turn back, to go back to the path, to go back to your disciplines and to go back into alignment of who you are and what you're doing, your thing that you're committed to. And so I think we have such a connotation with this word sin that it's like that list: do not do this, do not do that, do not do this. If I just can stay away from those, I'm good. Really, it's just anything that we do from ego that binds us more, instead of doing things from heart and devotion, that untangles us from the over attachment to material life. Is that helpful, Azriel?
Well, that verse that you quoted, Dharma, the last sentence of it is, duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reaction. So sinful reaction means sins. So if Arjuna is saying, how is it that we sin even against our own will? And we're saying, what is sin? And this here is saying, sins or person prescribing your own duties is never affected by sin, then the definition of sin is doing things which are not part of our prescribed duties. And what is Arjuna trying to do? He's trying to do something against his prescribed duty.
Bail on the war.
Bail.
Let me just go meditate and become self-realized.
Yeah, which would create a sin, because all sorts of drama would happen if he did that.
Okay, well, let's continue on with some of these verses and see what answer Krishna gives Arjuna. I'll read one more and then someone else can read after this. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, we're on chapter 3, text 37. He said, it is lust only. Lust is what impels us against our will, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath, and which is the all-devouring sinful enemy of this world. I think of that Star Wars scene where Yoda says, you know, oh, he's angry. Anger turns into hatred, and hatred turns into whatever else he went on to, right? Like it builds and it builds, and we get more and more entangled into these sort of deeper, very material mode motivated energies that really just like snarl us up into more and more entanglements, where we're just stuck. We feel like we're just stuck in this world that we have no control over. Okay, right. So the mode of passion. So as soon as we come into contact with the material mode of passion, like as soon as we come into that human body, boom, we're in connection with the mode of passion. But the more we engage in the mode of passion and the mode of passion is an interesting one. I just want to say before we go on, when you are studying the gunas, we do want to move towards being sattvic, even though all of the modes are just a part of the world that we're in. And so we can find ways to still get some good out of some of them in some ways. But the mode of passion, they're all like coins with two sides. So the mode of passion has its negative side, which spirals us downward into those tamasic energies, right? So we're irritated, then we're frustrated, then we're mad, then we're getting resentful, then we're getting jealous, and we're getting vindictive, and we're getting revenge, and then we're just spiraling down. But we can also use the mode of passion to propel us forward into sattva. So we don't want to think that the mode of passion is just like, oh, we just shouldn't, like the way the Hare Krishnas do kirtan is fully in the mode of passion. Fully in the mode of passion. It's such rajasic kirtan. It is insane. But it's the kind of rajasic energy, passionate energy that uplifts you into goodness. As opposed to going to like a punk metal death band mosh pit, which is also really rajasic. And then you just come out of there all raw, and then you're just like, you're doing all the tamasic stuff. You're drinking, you're hanging out, you're all getting intoxicated and up at the late hours, hanging out with the people that come out at 3 o'clock in the morning. So Rajas can push us either way, and we really want to learn to ride the wave of Rajas, use our Rajasic energy towards goodness. So sometimes as yogis, we get really rigid around this, like, oh, I just have to be sattvic. Rajas is not good. It's too rajasic, and we have to move through the mode of rajas to get to the mode of sattva, to goodness. There's no way around it. Okay.
So what does kama mean? Lust, it seems, are we talking about watching porn? I mean, like, what are we talking about?
Kama is pleasure, right? So also, I've mentioned in teacher training, there are the 4 pillars to life. In Ayurveda, there are 4 pillars to life that give us a well-rounded, healthy, harmonious life. Kama, artha, I forget, so it's wealth, pleasure, dharma, our purpose, and moksha, liberation. Kama, right, which is pleasure. Artha, which is wealth. dharma, knowing our purpose, living our purpose, and moksha, liberation. Those 4 pillars give us a really like stable, balanced life. And so kama means pleasure, but what kind of pleasure? Spiritual pleasure or sense pleasure? Pleasure that you get from serving others or doing, contributing to others, or pleasure that you get because somebody's doing something for you. Right? And so sinful activities are pleasures that make us more entangled with the material world. And ones that don't have the sinful reactions are the pleasures that we do that bring us closer to our spiritual nature. You can see it like the spectrum. We're either moving towards or we're moving away. Yes, Azriel.
This is not necessarily I see someone, I know someone close in my life who tends to like go the other direction for things.
What does that mean?
So like the pleasure seems to come from like fruitive actions, and it's like they're kind of like lost, and that's what is driving them in the background. How will they, so like how can they get out of that? Is that just their own thing to realize? Because it's quite challenging to like all of a sudden hear them say something and you're like, that's where your mind goes for your like intention. Like it's kind of like, yeah. So is that like just their own path to have to recognize and realize and learn? Or
Well, so
like
there's a lot.
how does the salve get put onto their eyes or taken off? Or
It takes them off and you go, here.
Give me some
I know, that's why I'm like,
Go ahead, Jaggai.
Yeah, wipe some of your eye boogers on them and they will awaken. So there's lots and lots of paths, as Krishna says in the Gita, so many different, everybody's on a path, and all those paths eventually lead to Krishna. But it doesn't mean that they're all going at the same speed and they're all going as like speedy. Some of them are paths of struggle and like reaction. And so, and we're also on that path where we do dumb things and we get reactions. If they and we get the kind mercy and association of higher spiritualized people, that infection of bhakti helps like kicks, like jump us leaps and bounds. So you can, first of all, know that Krishna is in control. Second of all, if you want to help them, you can do simple things like, talk to them a bit about the philosophy, and maybe they understand, maybe they don't understand. Chant Hare Krishna, do certain things that help purify people and implant into their brain a little tool set of spirituality that when they find themselves in trouble, they can latch onto it. I've known so many people who are completely drenched in material life and everything turns on a dime. And then what they have left is maybe some philosophy that they heard, some kirtan that they heard. I had a friend who, I had a friend that was completely tweaking out on LSD, and they were listening to the Beatles. And in one of the Beatles songs, it's like a bunch of sounds. There's the word, they say Hare Krishna. And he heard that and he's like, what was that? What is the weirdest word? What is it? They went out and about in town to like get some food and whatever. And as they were walking through town, and he told me he had zero interest in spirituality, zero, thought it was all stupid. He sees a sign that says Hare Krishna Festival. And he's like, oh, I heard that sound. There's a festival for that sound. What the hell? And he was freaked. Like he said, he took way too much acid. So it just so happened, it was exactly at that time, a couple blocks away. So they went down, they walked into a building, and it was right in the middle of like this incredible kirtan, and everybody's jumping up and down, freaking out, screaming, banging cymbals, shouting Hare Krishna. And just because of that experience, he thought, this is something I need to investigate. How is it that I heard the sound and I'm here and all these things lined up? He eventually gave up drugs, became a devotee, became a great, wonderful, loving person because of these experiences. How could you have figured that out? You can't, because if someone's spiritual path isn't controlled by Krishna, not us. So you do what you can do. You speak what you can speak. You say what you can say. You give mantra when you can. Give some prasadam, offer some food and say, here, take this, and see how Krishna leads them.
You just, are a light in their experience in this opportunity here to just live by example and invite them in and be like Krishna and just pull them in a little bit. They're in your orbit for whatever reason. And, there's lots of things you can do without just outright saying like, hey, that's really egoic what you're doing. Why don't you check out this philosophy that tells you how to be a better spiritual person? But you can like make a suggestion like, wow, that's really great. You're going to have all this success. Like, maybe do you have a scholarship slot available for somebody so that you can help someone out in the community? Or are you going to take a portion of your proceeds and donate it to some charity? Or you can encourage them like, hey, wow, you're having great success. How cool would it be if you like help somebody out a little bit with that, or find a way to make a suggestion? Or sometimes there are really great books that teach us these concepts. There's a great book called The Leader Who Had No Title. And that's a really good one, written by a guy named Robin Sharma. And he also wrote a book called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. True story. He wrote that book. But yeah, you just kind of, it's hard, especially when we're coming into this and we're so enthused about it. And we see other people who are like also in this sort of spiritual world terrain, like they're studying New Age philosophies or law of attraction and these things. And you see people missing the mark a little bit. But that mark is your mark. Remember, that's your value. This is where we start to impose our values on other people. Your value is that I want to be in service and I want to make everything spiritual in my life, and I don't want to have any sinful reactions. I don't want any more karma. I want to be a good person. My value is that I want to live this way. This feels very genuine to me. And then we impose that on others and say, hey, you're doing your spiritual life all wrong. But here's again when we come to this verse. It's better to just do you, live your spiritual journey, than to even get involved in someone else's spiritual journey. People will come along and they'll come to you for advice. They'll come to you for help. They'll come to you. But to bring it to them, like, that's out of your purpose. It becomes your purpose when now they are asking for advice, or they're asking for direction, or they're asking for support. Now it's a part of your purpose. Right, so don't try to do Krishna's duty. It's Krishna's duty to bring us all back to him. It's not our duty to make sure everybody gets back. We can all walk each other home, like Krishna Das and Ram Das say. We're all here just to walk each other home, but it's not our duty. Our duty is to get ourselves home. It's Krishna's job to set that up for everybody else. And we can hold each other's hands and be nice and support each other and cheer each other on, and sometimes be a mirror when Krishna works us that way. Not us saying, I'm here to be the mirror and reflect to you. But through Krishna's arrangements, as Jagai so wonderfully explained in that story, is these synchronicities just happen. And it's like, it'll just, when it just is really right for that person, they'll have clarity. And it may not be this lifetime. It may be in a few months, it may be in 20 years, it may be 2 lifetimes from now. That person's on their journey, and you just keep being you and lead by example, right?
I have another quick story, but I know Riley had her hand up.
Yes.
Thanks. I already forgot. It just reminded me right before we got on, I was trying to catch up a little bit, and Azrael, your question reminded me of verse 21. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. That resonated a lot with me.
Nice, great quote, great quote. So quick story, and then we'll continue on. But a long time ago, Bilvamangala, who was a young lusty man, he was always seeking prostitutes all around town. And there was a prostitute named Chintamani. And oddly enough, which happens a bit in the Vedic teachings and the Vedic stories, prostitutes here and there are actually also yogis in their mind, because remember, it's your dharma is not connected to your heart. So she was a favorite of Bilvamangala. He was wealthy and he was super lusty. So one night it was storming like hell, but Bilvamangala wanted to go see Chintamani. He had that lusty fire. So he went out in the storm in the night. And when he got to the river, it was fully like roaring. He swam across it anyways. The bridge was out. When he got to her house, the big gate, and it was locked. He climbed the wall and got to her door in the middle of the night after all this. He knocked on the door, and she opened the door. And she said, "Are you joking? You're insane. You did all that to come here for sex?" She said, "If you put that endeavor into your spirituality, you would be a great yogi." And he was moved and embarrassed. And he went home. And those words rung so strong in him that he left and became a yogi. And he became such a great yogi that he wrote one of the most important books in all Vedic teachings, the Krishna Karnamrita. And page 1 of it, it's dedicated to Chintamani because of what she said to him. And he considered her his guru. So how do we know when something is going to spark somebody? We don't know. It's up to Krishna. And what we want to do is always pray and try and let Krishna do the work from there. Okay, makes sense? Okay.
It's a great place to pause, actually. And I know these lovely students here both are on child watch at the moment. You both are like looking, it was so funny from my end. And we're about to really dive into lust here. He's going to talk about lust. And I think maybe we can save that for next week, because that might have a whole slew of things that come up. And there's some really nice analogies, very poetic in the way that he talks about the nature of lust and what we can do about it.
Sounds good.
So, yes.
Jagai, what was that text that was dedicated to Chintamani?
Chintamani, it's a book called
Chintamani?
Krishna Karnamrita. Let's see if I can find it and give you a link. Krishna Karnamrita. Chintamani. Okay, here. Actually, this is interesting. Somebody had published it. This is the actual first verse of the Krishna Karnamrita. Let me see if I'll paste it here. Written by Bilva Mangala Thakur. And the very first verse of it says, first of all, Sri Bilva Mangala Ji says, and then this is the verse, glories be to prostitute Chintamani, not to Bhagavan or to his guru, not to Sri Ganesh, the bestower of auspiciousness, and not to Sri Shankar or some god of goddess. What is it so? Means that that of all the people, Chintamani was the one that actually got him on the path, and he dedicated his book to her. Let me see if I can find something more. I think that's a weird translation. One more second.
Well, if the guy is looking for that, I love this story. I've heard it many times. And there's so many things that we do that for. We will go outside in the storm and traverse things, like there's so many things that we all know we do. It's like, oh, I've really put a lot of effort into making sure that happened. But I did not put the same amount of effort in making sure I got on my yoga mat today. But before we close up and Jagai gets another version of that text, what are your guys' takeaways from today's study? What most stuck with you that you feel like is applicable to your life right now? Go ahead, Riley.
I think I had mentioned a little bit about how I always kind of go back and forth with social media. Like, do I have an online presence when I'm in these deep rebirth cycles? I don't want anyone looking at me, don't perceive me. And then I really go deep in it. So this kind of helped me to reflect on that, because social media is something I'm really good at and was my first job. My dad is an engineer, and I resonate with computer coding and tech very deeply, but I've always also had a very serious spiritual path, and I've juggled with that a lot. So just being reminded that you can be yourself, and also that by being yourself, it helps others to know that it's okay to be themselves too. And that spiritualizing of our desires, I've kind of thought of it as like alchemy. It's nap time, or like an alchemical process. So this is just kind of like putting that into different words, which has really helped me at this point. And trying to find a way to make social media purposeful without being in my ego, thinking that I am impacting people by impacting them. So thank you.
I couldn't find anything, but
oh, I'll look up the name, and I'll go down rabbit holes that I can find. So thank you.
this is the book Krishna Karnamrita, and Bill, I spelled it weird. Bill such a popular book, and the introduction, the beginning of it is to Chintamani. And if you just look that up, you'll read the story. Get a great story. But anyways, I hope that answered your question, Ashriel, about your friend.
Yeah, it's funny because we have these long conversations on Zoom, and life happens and I forget. And then I'm like, oh yeah, because we literally had just talked about leading by example and not trying to force anything upon anybody, but rather the guru and these people, self-realized people, don't necessarily have to act in these ways, but it helps other people around them become self-realized, so they do it. And so yeah, just coming back to that remembrance of just be you and be committed to your path and to Krishna, and all other things will work themselves out as they should, whether I believe that that's the way they should or not.
It's also a very rare scenario to be involved with those who are interested in spiritual philosophy. It's not common. This world is meant for, constructed for, this body is meant for, constructed for enjoying material life. And so it's not easy. Krishna says of thousands of people, only a few will make an endeavor for spirituality. And we're talking about any kind of spirituality, crystals and pyramids. And out of many thousands of those, only a few will understand in truth the real meaning of divinity. So it's not that easy, and it's not so common. Very difficult. Yeah, Prabhupada said, if you go to the market, there's thousands of people. If you go to the jewelry store, 1 or 2 people. And why? Because the jewelry store is much more expensive. And so spirituality is it costs a lot, because it takes a lot of mental and heart energy to make that connection. It's not so cheap. And so, it's
Good analogy. I like that.
huh? Yeah.
That was good. Yeah. I like that analogy. Yep. Brings me back to that statement, right? The greatest gift you can give others is your own transformation. Like ultimately, you can't change anybody, but you can inspire somebody. You can touch someone's heart just by your example. And I was just talking to a friend yesterday and today about knowing that we can help somebody that I know that's a coach, knowing that we can, like, there's people out there that we can see, like, you really need the coaching that I have. But the more, even if you don't say it, but your energy is like, you're really attached to, like, but you really need that. I need you to have this, right? But the more we can soften and let go and not have any expectations and just be that person's safe corner to come to for help. And when they are like, yeah, I need it, as opposed to you need this. Just like that verse that Riley had referenced, it says, right, to those who are in ignorance, don't disturb them. They are where they are. Our best thing to do is just to keep doing what we do, keep anchoring in your spirituality. And when that person has that moment that clicks, they know that you're somebody that they can come to for guidance, for resource, for reflection, for all those things, right? So just, we live our lives and we just keep trying to cultivate ourselves and let everybody be on their own journey. I think that's sometimes one of the hardest things for us, is to just really honor that everybody is on their own unique timeline. We really are.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to grasp, but in time, I know myself, I struggle with it, but I have a pretty decent understanding that in no way am I a guide, but by some kind mercy from my guru, I can just be the doorman to open the door. And if you go in it, nice. That has nothing to do with me. I just open the door for you. You don't go in it, I'm not going to push you in there. It's just, you come, somebody asks you about Gita, Dharma about Gita, you open the door, you there, and that's it. Or like the mailman puts the mail in the box, you go down there and it's a love letter and you think, oh, thank you. And maybe you hug and kiss the mailman, but he didn't write it. He just delivering it. And so, who's actually the author of this great knowledge? It's not us. We're just delivering it. And that's it. If a person takes it, if it's not up to us.
I think, a doorman is great. I love When you go to India, they actually have a doorman at hotels and stuff, and the term is chokidar, right? There's a doorman. And it's we consider that like not a high class job, doorman. You open the door for rich people typically, right? But I've always thought of it before I heard this wonderful analogy from Jagai. It's just as the gatekeeper. Like I'm just the gatekeeper, meaning I know where all the doors are. And if you come and you approach me and you're looking for something, I can probably show you a couple of doors that you get to decide if you want to walk through. But I have no attachment to whether you walk through them or not, whether you want to peek in or I start to open and you're like, never mind, I changed my mind, whatever it is. I'm just there. That's my job. I'm just holding space and letting people know there are doors that you can walk through to change the trajectory of your life if you want. And they know that I am that person because of the way that I live my life and the way that I hold space for others, right? And so it just keep being you, and it'll happen in your own way. It'll happen in your own way. Beautiful class, great discussion, always a pleasure, so very fulfilling for me. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you all being here, and we'll see you next Thursday. If you join us again at 1:30. And for catching this recording later, thank you for catching the recording later. I know we got some after hours watchers. We got Jenna out there who watches. So shout out to Jenna, and maybe Bhakta Max will pick up a recording. And we got some others who I know are always watching the recordings later on. I think Kima watches these sometimes. So just shout out to all of you who are out there studying and not live with us, but here with us. And we appreciate your presence and your endeavor, and we honor you. We'll close it out. Vanchakalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hari Bol.
Vaishnava Sangha ki jai. Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Oda Premanandi. Hari
Bol. Really quickly, so especially for you, Riley, where Jagai showed you on page 1 was the opening prayer.
Yes.
On there, if you continue on to page 2, you'll see there should be the Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha. That verse is also in there, so you can read along with us when we do that one as well. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. We'll see y'all soon. Have a beautiful, blessed day. Till next time.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
Bye.